this is very, 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 very difficult to talk about. And to even try to capture the emotions of that day and the horrifying knowledge of what had happened.
Well, now it's been...
it's been now it was just 15 years last week.
Last week, yeah.
Yeah, on the 10th.
Yeah.
And it is still hard to put into words.
Watch and subscribe.
Thank you. Hey, everybody. Thanks for being patient with us while we were sick and
traveling
holidays, and we're feeling a little better this week, though you can hear my voice is a little odd, but we're both doing better. So thank you for your patience, and we're going to go ahead and continue on with our marriage story, starting with the last night that we spent with our son, which we didn't really say that last time, but the last night we spent with our son, we were excuse me, watching a movie, and the movie ended up going out for whatever reason. We tried to get it back on and we didn't, so we kind of all said goodnight. We gave each other hugs, and we all went to bed.
He did talk to you.
Yeah.
For a little bit. Wanted to see about transferring schools, a school that had a better automotive department. So he was talking things of the future. I mean, we knew he was upset. We knew that there was things that weren't right, but there wasn't a glaring red flag to me.
No. Well, kinda to me, I said.
In hindsight, yes, but I didn't anticipate what we were going to be challenged with next. So at any rate,
and the date, this particular date was January 9th, 2007, and at that time, Andrew, our oldest son, was 17, Christopher was 15, and Corinna was 11.
Correct.
But the only one home that night was us and Chris. Andy was having a lot of issues and wasn't even living at the house at the time.
He was living,
and he dropped out of school and just went off in a bad direction. And Corinna just wasn't there that particular night. It wasn't a weekend, and she wasn't there.
Correct. So anyway, knowing that he has snuck out in the past, I slept on the couch because we knew that he had some issues he wanted to work out with his girlfriend. So I kind of was standing guard there. And sometime during the night, he did sneak by me. But we'll skip to the next morning.
Right, January 10th.
January 10th. Started out fairly ordinary, and we were trying to get resolved what took place. We were calling his outpatient counselor.
Yeah, what took place at the outpatient place the night before when a bunch of stuff happened and he had left the outpatient, which, if you haven't seen it, that's in part 2 of this video. Sex series.
Sex series?
No, in this part 2 of our marriage series.
She said sex series, but I was missing out on that. Anyway, so we were dealing with him, getting the information there, which, in light of everything we found out later, the counselor allowed things to progress way beyond what he should have. We were very upset with the counselor.
Very.
He basically allowed 2 boys to bully and gang up on our son, which he's not a weakling and he's not a kid to be bullied, but he basically allowed things to escalate way beyond what they should have. Um, and at any rate, he had left there. We picked him up over at our son's apartment, our other son's apartment, Andy's.
Yeah.
And then he called his counselor and went to a meeting.
Yeah, but now you're going back to the night before.
Right. But, so we also talked to the counselor. The counselor wanted us to know what?
They didn't really tell us much, actually.
No. His sponsor.
Well, then
John Jolin. He went.
Oh, but that's the next day.
Yes.
Oh, right.
So that's
I'm sorry.
why I'm going to the next day.
Oh, okay. Where we talked to them, and then his sponsor called us because the night before we watched movies and stuff, Christopher did call us AA sponsor and went to a meeting. And so then he came home. We watched the movie. We all went to bed. Then the next morning we were again dealing with all this, trying to find out what happened. We tried getting a hold of the counselor, and then in the meantime, probably around noon, Chris's sponsor called to see how things were going, and at that time filled us in that Christopher had told him the night before at the meeting that he had smoked some pot and did take in a bunch of caffeine pills, which we did not know that the night before. We had no clue. And so that would have been a big red flag for us to probably even stay up with him all night because that's dangerous. But of course we didn't know that until the next day. But while you were on the phone with him.
Yeah, I owned a construction company at that time, and so I kept my work clothes down in the basement, and I decided, I was talking with this counselor, and I decided
with his sponsor.
Yes, with his sponsor, and I decided at that point that I probably should go wake Chris up, and then we could sit down and get to the bottom of these things. So when I went to the basement, and that's when I discovered Chris. He had hung himself, and it's something that, well, I wouldn't wish upon anybody, but it hits you like a ton of bricks. It's like your mind doesn't register what just took place. I mean, am I really seeing what I'm seeing? I mean, it really took me back. She knew something was wrong because I was on the phone with his sponsor. I said, God, no, not Chris. God, no, Chris, right?
Yeah.
And she come running, and I ran back up the stairs to stop her from coming. Then I ran back down to, I'm like, this can't be what I'm seeing. And I've always been a person that's always been able to fix things. I've always been able to, even if it's a big screw up, I can always fix it. And, I guess it took me 2 or 3 times to realize that I wasn't God, and I wasn't going to change this particular outcome. And of course, like I said, he hung himself, and at that point, she was inconsolable. I called her brother. I called her sister, and I'm trying to call 911 and get all these things going, correct?
Right.
And she was of no help at that moment. The only thing she could remember is Pastor Kingsbury's number.
Yeah.
But her sister flew in from Lake Geneva. I mean, I didn't fly, but she may have needed a pilot's license because she was there before her brother, who only lived probably 25 minutes across town. So I don't know how fast her sister actually was going to get there to render aid to her sister Tina. and Matt showed up there, which was a big relief on me because then I could focus on what I needed to do. Um,
Which was go and tell Andy.
Yeah.
Our son lived only right down the street from us.
Yeah, so I went and got Andy at that time.
And that was horrible to have to tell him because
That's the second
as
time.
of, I don't remember if it's part 1 or part 2, where I think part 2, we talked about their father's death. You know, we have a blended family with, Corinna, Chris, and Andy at this point. Chris and Andy being my children and Corinna being his daughter. And, but so their biological father had committed suicide 4.5 years before that. So we, at that time, had to sit the boys down and tell them that. Now, he had to go he went and got Andrew and told him that Chris had now taken his own life.
Which I said I'd never do after they're dead.
Right.
You know.
But it was just, this is very, 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 very difficult to talk about. And to even try to capture the emotions of that day and the horrifying knowledge of what had happened.
Well, now it's been.
I really, it's been now it was just 15 years last week.
Last week, yeah.
Yeah, on the 10th.
Yeah.
And it is still hard to put into words.
Well, yeah.
And it's still hard for me to even comprehend, which I know that sounds weird. But it's just, it just wreaks havoc on the mind, I guess. Because you want to hit a back button, you want to undo what's happened, you can't undo it. It's total and absolute defeat. And I just sat on the bed, praying and asking God for help, to be honest. Because didn't know what else to do, I guess.
No one would. No one does.
So Andy came over, our house started filling with people, and then the fire department came.
And the coroner.
And then the coroner, so then, they have to talk to everybody, make sure there was no foul play, and determine the cause of death and everything. And so that day was just doing all that. And people coming to the house, and
which were all a great help. No one came in and was in the way. They were all consoling and just trying to be helpful at every aspect, right?
Right.
Which was a blessing. Didn't realize it at the time, but it was a blessing. And like she said, I mean, we were able to talk with not quite the for me, the emotion, because it's been 15 years. I mean, and there was a long period of time that I know it sounds strange, but my last vision of Christopher's face was of Chris's passing, and I couldn't look at pictures for
a very long time.
Many years. In fact, we had to take pictures off the walls. That's all I could see. It didn't matter how pleasant of a picture it was of Chris. That's just what I seen when I seen Chris, which is very difficult because she needs the opposite. She needs to see him and wants to see him. So working with each other was, getting through that. Another thing that helped us is we went to Survivors of Suicide.
For about 3.5 years, they have groups all over the probably all over the world, for suicide loss, and they have different fundraisers and events like on what's called an Out of the Darkness walk. And so we did those events for a while. And then we also, because I'm in the program, for my alcohol and drug addiction, we actually sadly had the opportunity to help a lot of other families who lost people to suicide and overdoses and other things, but a lot of them to suicide.
Correct.
Just people in this circle, of addiction and stuff have a lot of this stuff happen in their lives. It's just one of the tragedies of alcohol and drug addiction is losing people to suicide, drug overdoses, car accidents, you name it.
So yeah, at first we kind of went there for counseling, and towards the end, and as part of the healing process, we were part of the counseling for the people that came in there freshly.
Yeah, and some didn't even never even came to the groups. We just, because they were people in, AA, we just knew about
or a friend
the
of a
death,
friend.
or people would call us a friend of a friend, and we'd talk to people and try to help them. But, and then also in the midst of all this, I've done all kinds of stuff, technical, over the years, and I created a website called Christopher'sCandle.com. There's a link below. And I made a page on that website where people who have lost someone to suicide can light a candle. A little candle flickers, and you can they can write a memorial for someone they lost to suicide. So again, I'm putting a link below to that. So if you or someone else have lost someone to suicide, you're welcome to go and write a memorial to them. I found it helpful to write, and wanted to just make a place where other people could do that. That site that's listed below, I also have different resources on there for suicide loss. Anyway, you're welcome to look around that site. It doesn't make money. It doesn't do anything like that. Literally, it's a resource for people, because I just know how hard it was when we lost Chris, and we were so thankful to have people around us and resources that could help us work through it, and that helped our family actually. And just to step back a little bit, so with Corinna being only 11 at the time, Jared's parents came out that day that Chris died, and Corinna was an hour away from us. So she had always lived an hour away. So Jared drove out with his parents to tell her. And that particular night, and for actually a long time, because of her age, we did not tell her how Chris died.
Well, I told her that Chris had
hurt himself.
But
she really didn't comprehend that. Because she ended up hearing what actually happened months later by our neighbors. Our neighbors had 2 kids, one daughter that was Corinna's age and one son that was Chris's age.
And a friend of his.
Yeah, and a best friend of his. And Katie at the time, too, was a best friend of Corinna's.
Yes.
And so she overheard it from them, which then she was very upset about. It's hard to know what to do in that situation, because it's so scary that suicide, once it happens in a family, it tends to be an option for other members of that family. Like, for instance, the boys' father took his own life 4.5 years before Chris took his own life. And Chris took his own life, like Jared said. He did hang himself in the basement, which his father had done the same thing, same location. Not in our house, but his aunt's home. Chris had a note in his pocket with 3 different things in it, referencing 3 different things. His father had a note in his pocket referencing 3 different things. So, I mean, when suicide's in a family, it just tends that it could be an option for other family members. So that's very, very scary to even want to tell other people, especially children, that a suicide has occurred.
Which, you know, her saying that the notes, just so you're aware, if you're dealing with this, the coroner, according to our coroner, suicide notes are rare. So I don't know if it was a blessing or not a blessing, but she found more often than not there was nothing to do with this. I mean, they don't write a letter or tell you why or what. The other thing is that I found unbelievable, and I had to ask the coroner, but the way Chris had committed suicide by hanging himself, there was a point of no return for him, but he could have stopped it. And I asked the coroner, and you know, the movies predicted show it like someone stands on a chair and they kick the chair out, and she says no, that's very rare. Most always they're standing with their feet firmly on the ground, and that was the case with my son. I mean, he basically just, you know, let his knees buckle, and there is a point that you're not gonna change that. So that was difficult for me, because to me, I would think that anyone, you know, might get to that point, but then would be like change their mind. But obviously they didn't. But I just had to interrupt with that, because these are some of the questions I had, and suicide is, we found, not as uncommon as we once thought.
Oh my gosh, there's like 35,000 suicides a year just in the United States.
Yeah.
Every single year. And I think with COVID this year, or this past year, it was even higher. You'd have to look at the numbers. I don't want to quote anything because I can't remember, but it was awfully high. I think it was over 40, I think. And they say for every one suicide, at least 10 people are affected.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of people that deal with this a year. We know a lot of people. And especially because of, again, my background in, you know, in Alcoholics Anonymous and so on.
Yeah, people would start reaching out to us, like, oh, they would tell us that this family, someone in the group there, they called us immediately. A kid had committed suicide, and we went to the hospital and met the parents there.
No, I was at that very meeting because he committed suicide in the parking lot of the meeting.
Correct. But we ended up going to the hospital, and we just simply went up to them. They didn't know us from Boo at the time. I mean,
No.
And we said, hey, look, we're just here to let you know you went through this a couple years prior to what you're going through. There's going to become a moment that this is going to be overwhelming, and if you need someone to talk to that can relate to this, let us know. And they did. They reached out to us. I think what's hard for people is, you know, a tragic, sudden death. We can accept that. Well, we don't accept it, but we learn to cope and deal with that. A lengthy illness or something like that. But when someone says, hey, I'm checking out, I don't want to be a part of this anymore, a myriad, you know, I wasn't good enough to stay around for our own selfish thoughts, you know.
And we should have stayed up all night that night. Yeah. And what else should we have done? I mean, 100 things go through your mind.
I didn't love him enough, or we didn't spend, you know, we were horrible parents. Oh, you go through that.
Well, especially with my alcohol and drug addiction, because obviously I could have been a better parent.
Yeah. There should have been, or there should have, would have, could have, you know, shoulda, coulda, would have done differently. That runs through your mind.
And that's all a natural part of dealing with such a loss. And then, just, and a lot of people, have the idea that, oh, if someone dies by suicide, they're not going to go to heaven. Well, a lot of religions have taught that over the years. And if you read the history on it, it was, I want to say St. Augustine. I could be wrong with that. There was a rash of suicides. I think it was in the 1500s or something. It could be longer. But, and again, I think it was St. Augustine that made it a non-recoverable sin because
he was trying to
prevent more suicides because there were just so many. And so you could say, when I look at that, I think, well, in a positive light, he was trying to prevent more suicides and thought by making it a non-forgivable sin that would prevent the suicides.
Correct.
So, but nowhere in the Bible there's like 7 suicides.
King Solomon?
Yeah, none, dropped on his sword. There are 7 suicides and they don't go into what happened. They just basically state it was a suicide.
In fact, it never says that guy went to hell.
No, I mean, but, we all, if you have a belief in God, which we do, we have a very strong faith in God, a strong belief in the Bible and Christ, and which we lean on for help and have leaned on for help through this. But in addition, when it comes to just living day-to-day life, we should all, well, for us, we try to depend on him to help us through every day, every moment.
For us personally.
Yeah, I mean, but we do understand, there is mental illness in this world. And I know I've also heard a lot of people say, that's a very selfish thing to do for someone to take their own life. Well, of course it is, because so many people have to deal with the aftermath of it. I mean, we have a big family, and it has really affected the dynamics in our family. Chris is gone, and that we haven't, you don't just fill that hole.
Well,
but
of
before I forget, let me finish just this train of thought, is that we also got to remember, okay, it's selfish in the fact that it affects so many people, but there is the mental illness aspect to it. And most of us, I tried when I was younger and on heavy drugs, I tried to take my own life a few times, and I ended up in mental health and treatment centers 7 times between the age of 12 and 21. So there's a lot of different reasons that people try to take their own life. But anyway, what did you want to say?
Well, everybody handles it differently.
Yeah.
And I think she was headed there, got sidetracked, and we'll finish with this, and we'll have to make another part here because we're coming on 30 minutes here.
Yeah.
But Corinna, what we come to find out and didn't realize,
well, later,
until much
several
later,
years later,
is, at first I'm like, wow, she took this differently. It was just something that just, Andy was so much different. He was crying, bawling, angry, everything you can imagine. He lost his best friend, his brother. He wore Chris's suicide on his sleeve. I mean, there was no question. Corinna, you're like, well, she recovered. Hardly said a peep about it. Was quiet about it. Seemed relatively normal on this. And
they were very close. So it was kind of like surprising.
Yeah, I even, like, man.
But she was 11, so we just weren't sure.
And come to find out, she blamed herself.
Yeah.
For all these years, she thought that she had done something.
To cause it.
That somehow that she could. And, I guess that all I'm trying to say is I thought we did. We tried to be very open and that about it. But, don't be afraid to push them a little bit to make them, talk about it a little bit. Because You know, she sat there, and I believe, you know, that is part of some of her anxiety struggles, because she literally would lay awake at night or cry herself to sleep thinking that she was a part of her brother's death, you know, somehow responsible for that. But anyway, I know this is a crappy spot to stop. We're at 30 minutes. I don't know how many times she's going to have to break this little part up, but.
Oh, I'm not. We'll leave this one, but there are still some things to go from there.
Okay.
A lot of different things we've dealt with following that, because at that time of Chris's death, we were married 8 years. We're now married 22. We won't have as much still to talk about. This was a very big topic, but one second. One other big event we had, which we'll be talking about, is a couple years after Chris's death, we had an adopted son come into our life. So, oh my gosh, we've really just had so much stuff happen. But so we'll be maybe talking about that in our next one. I don't know if we'll just have 1 or 2 more parts to this. This is the 3rd part, either 4 or 5 parts, I would think.
But some things to be looking forward to as far as travel. Our daughter took us on a private jet.
Yesterday, we went on a private jet
to Miami.
So we'll be showing some footage on that here in the next couple weeks when we finish this up, along with giving you guys a tour of our new camper. We only kept our other camper for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
But anyway, we'll talk about that.
It.
But we really, really appreciate you guys. We really hope this particular part of our marriage story helps somebody. And
maybe connects you a little bit more to us too.
Yeah, and you know, we're just normal people.
Well, I am.
Who have yeah, okay. I would agree. You're a little more normal than me. I can agree with that.
She's
That's
the
fine.
loud one.
That's fine. But anyway, we really appreciate you guys watching. We love filming our videos. Hope we bring you guys some entertainment as well as people you can relate to. And anyway, we will see you next week for part 4. Who knows what we'll talk about then.
All right.
But we'll kind of continue on in our story.
Maybe
and
that sex thing?
No, there's no sex thing.
Well, you said something about sex earlier. Okay. But probably not.
Probably not. But anyway, thank you again for watching. And please like our video and really leave us comments. We don't get a lot of comments from people, and we'd love to hear from you guys.
Yeah.
So thank you. God bless.
Peace.
Give us a huge